Right, good morning. Welcome to ClayChat. Today we speak to Lindsay Scott, all the way from Hillford Pottery in the Midlands, beautiful Kwa-Zulu Natal. Lindsay, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rika. I'll begin right at the beginning, which was around 1970 when I was a student at Portland State University in Oregon in the USA. I was quite lost at that period, as so many of us are when we're in our early 20s. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I thought that being a scientist or being an artist, I'd never done any artwork in my life. They seem to involve creativity and imagination, whereas I thought being a businessman would be the absolute pits. That's not quite the way I feel nowadays, but I did in those days. Anyhow, I was involved in doing a science degree at Portland State University, and for some reason I went down and took ceramics and or learned how to throw, and got quite excited by it all and got more and more involved in that, and eventually dropped out of my master's degree in science, and also dropped out of university and joined a few guys who had been ahead of me in the ceramics department and who started Oregon Stoneware Pottery. So I joined them and we set up Oregon Stoneware Pottery together, where I learned to build the gas kilns and also to throw very well. I had to come in and throw a lot of pots every morning, as well as load and unload the kiln quickly, because it was quite a small kiln and we had to get it fired. But for some reason, I always wanted to come home as well. So eventually I came home and set up a studio in Rivonia. And then again, I was at a bit of a loose end and decided I would travel around and see where I might want to live. I was in Joburg at that time. So I went through the Cape, and then there was this job available at Izandla Pottery, where they're looking for a manager, someone who knew about reduction firing and who could build reduction kilns. So I took that job, and this picture that's up there now would be closer to 1980, when I'd had a fair amount of experience. I built some very big kilns at Izandla Pottery, trolley kilns, oil-fired kilns. And this picture is from that time. And that's Lawrence with me there. We're carrying a pot together. He was the main kiln man. He used to load and unload the kilns. Because we used to do a lot of production. We were doing a firing a week. So we had throwers and the glazing, and so it was quite a useful period for me, because I was doing hundreds of glaze tests and a few pieces of my own that I would stick into the kiln. But it was mainly a production pottery, much like Kolonyama was probably the famous one at that time, although it already had pretty much died out by that time. So we were following in the footsteps of Kolonyama, but in the Transkei, not in Lesotho. Okay. Then I left Izandla and came here to Natal, where I had built my own studio, my own oil kiln, and I was starting to get interested in salt glaze. I suppose I should go back also to the theoretical aspect. This was the 60s, 70s, when we were all very anti-establishment, and I had read Michael Cardu's book in America. I was never mad about Michael Cardu's pots, but his philosophy seemed very interesting, and the idea of building everything up from scratch by yourself, your kilns, your glazes, even your house and how you lived. That was quite inspiring, although I never met him. And I was, on the one hand, quite taken by it, although unlike a lot of others who followed in the Leeds tradition, I tended to bring a rebellious aspect to that aspect, to the Leeds tradition itself. I think a lot of people saw being against the establishment and joining a Leeds tradition as sufficient, but I tended to carry the rebellion over into the Leeds tradition itself and started questioning certain aspects of it, and certainly going against the design aspect of it. A lot of people made pots that looked exactly like Leeds pots or like Kwa-Zulu pots, and whereas I went against that tradition a bit in that sense.
And slide, then we can start to talk about that work that you started there.
So yes, okay. So this is done in my oil kiln fire up to about 1400 centigrade with oil reduction, of course. What I liked about this was what can be seen on the rim is that reddy brown shale that I pick up in Weenan and I grind it up. It actually becomes a clay, but I used it all the time as a background slip. So that whole pot has got that slip on it. And then I use that semi-opaque green Celadon-like glaze over the top of it. Where it gets thick, it blocks the slip out completely. But there are always places where that slip breaks through the glaze very beautifully. I think that's what I enjoy about it. So that's quite a massive platter, one of the nicer pieces I think that I've done. I did quite a lot like that, actually, quite a few pieces. Do you want to move on? Or?
Yes, there you go. Can you see the next picture?
Okay, that's also in the oil kiln, also up to 1400 in porcelain. Actually, the same glaze. And in this case, the shale is poured on top rather than underneath the glaze. So, as you can see, it melts into this golden color, but what I really like about it is glossy halo, and then as you move into the interior of that slip, as you can see, it becomes more matte. So I really like that, and the contrast between the green glaze and the slip, semi-matte slip, was very, very good, I think.
Was these commercial clays, Lindsay, or was it your own mixtures?
No, I've never ever bought commercial clays. I've always done my own clays. I developed a porcelain body with calcined alumina in it rather than quartz, because calcined alumina produces a body that's much, much stronger. It's not quite as translucent as porcelain's based on quartz, but it's very, very, about 10 times stronger than normal porcelain. And you could actually make beautiful bells with it because it's got an incredible ring. But it's all my own clays. Well, you can't really buy clays for 1400 anyway, so you pretty much have to make your own clays.
And the glazes, I assume, then also your own recipes?
Yeah, as I said, that shale is one that I pick up in Weenan here, and I grind it up. And the glazes, yes, so just my own recipes. It's actually it's not as iron Celadon that I put a little bit of green stain into it, and it gives a more intense green, which I like as a contrast to that slip.
Okay, if you go to the next one, I don't know, you can see that one, teapot.
Yeah, that's again that porcelain. This time just with a clear glaze probably on top of the porcelain, and then that's a version of that slip poured on, and I just take my chances and a pour and hope that that it will take a nice form. So that's what I tried to do there. I think it is quite an interesting teapot. It's one of my recent ones, or made within the last 5 or 6 years anyway.
Oh, okay, so this is a recent one.
Yeah.
Beautiful white clay body. I love that. There's another plate.
And that's that tray idea again and again with the slip. This time the slip is underneath the glaze and breaking through in areas where it gets thick. As you can see, where it doesn't quite break through, it turns the white glaze a more opaque grey blue, and where it breaks through, it goes to the reddy browns. So, and that design is done with a credit card. Sort of bird-like design, which I quite like. I don't want it to be too literal, but it looked like birds flying across the plate.
Beautiful color combination. I love that.
Yeah, it's a nice piece. That's good.
Is that a clear glaze, Lindsay, or is that a white glaze on your clay body?
I think I did these quite a few years ago. I think that was just a clear, or maybe a semi. I would probably say most of the glazes are semi-opaque. I try to get more depth. Usually they're semi-opaque rather than clear. So it's probably just a semi-opaque glaze over the
over the body. There's your signature
yes.
pieces. I'm proud to say I'm an owner of one of these tile pieces.
Yeah, this is very recent salt glaze, where, as you can see, I work a lot with, those actually aren't finger marks in the side. That's just, I use a rib tool and leave those in, and then I quite like these indentations, and always I put that cleft down the center and then put a runny glaze in it so it runs down.
So that's a glaze strip, not as such an ash strip, because you say it's, yeah, there's no ash in your firing.
This is salt firing, and that's it could be an ash glaze actually. Most of the pot is unglazed there. That's just that little runny piece that's glazed, and it is a high whiting glaze. You could do the same thing with ash, because ash has a lot of calcium in it as well.
Beautiful.
But, okay, if you want to move on, that's fine.
Yes, there's another of your signature pieces. Lovely texture that you add to the style and the design.
Yes, I enjoy putting those on. Again, it has the cleft in it with a bit of runny glaze, and then the rest of it is just does what the salt does. There's not much glaze on it.
Would this also be your porcelain body, or is this a different clay body?
No, these are specifically salt bodies. Now the porcelain doesn't work in the salt. Not that especially that porcelain is the high alumina porcelain doesn't do nice things in the salt, so I don't use it.
Okay. There you go, a larger vessel. What is about the height of this vessel, Lindsay?
I think they were around 40 something when they were thrown. I don't know what they are now. These ones went to Cape Town. Yeah, and it's done in stages. I think you can more or less see the halfway mark. No, this one wasn't joined there, and this one we joined a bit higher than halfway. I often use the joint there where I put those indentations with sort of horizontal kind of design that cuts across the vertical character of the form.
And if I can ask, you say it's all salt firing. So is it the raw pot and the salt firing that gets that reaction, or is there a basic glaze like a chino on the pot on the outside?
Well, those two brownish orange stripes that come down, that's just the slip that I spray on. And it's got that runny glaze in the center again running down the rest of it is unglazed. So that slip, I was actually disappointed in these because they're shipped, normally goes a much more orange, whereas in this case, it's especially on the right there, you can see it turned almost brown, which upset me a bit. It wasn't what I don't know whether it was to do with the iron or something in the body, but it wasn't quite what I wanted. But it's still the nice form, I think. Nice. I like the pot.
Yes, beautiful. If we go on, there's one of your blocks. Lots of color variation there.
Yeah, there you can see on the slip going up the right hand. It's actually the middle of the pot, but it's on the right hand in the picture. And the rest of it, I think, is just where it picks up heavy salt. It obviously starts to orange peel, and inside, of course, it's just got a runny glaze, and so it's just the variations are just in the slip on the right hand side, and then with how much orange peel it picks up on the, and it's got a bit of that runny glaze, as you can see, put in here and there.
Yes. Maybe you can tell us, Lindsay, at what temperature do you actually add the salt in the process, just for people to understand the salt glazing process?
Yeah, the salt, I normally, it's about cone 7, I start salting, and then I do about 6 saltings, and the temperature sort of goes up and down around, although it tends to be going up slightly all the time. And then after that, I stop the salting, and then I fire until about 10, 11 falls down.
Okay.
And then I crash cool.
Oh, good.
Crash cool as quickly as I can, yeah. Because the salt goes very dark if you don't, if it cools too slowly. Even with crash cooling, it darkens a lot. You know, when you compare the tiles that you just pull out at the end of the firing to believe how much the color has changed and deepened. I really like this pot. It's obviously one of my most recent teapots. I don't know if people would like using it. I call them my Mad Max teapots. That's a commercial red that I put into a slip, and it came out very well on that side. On the other side of the teapot, actually, where it got too much salt, it tends to just bleach the red right out. It turned into a kind of pinky color that I don't like. But on this side, it kept the red, and I was very happy about that against the dark golden brown of the rest of the pot. I thought it was very nice.
Beautiful that you get that dark red at that high temperature. Normally the red fires out.
Yes, I thought it was quite amazing.
I love the handle, quite contemporary, hey?
Yes, I like the design of the pots. I did that chevron texture on top of the pot runs right from the back right through to the front of the spout, and then also on that little handle. I've also done versions of this where I put a handle like on the jug, like my jug handles on, but I also kept that chevron pattern on the. It's a bit like I think of it as a puff adder. Puff adder.
Beautiful.
It goes right from on the handle all the way from the bottom of the pot right through to the end of the spout.
It's a gorgeous piece. I love that. There we've got one of your older salt-based pieces.
So these are some of the very old pieces that I did in the 80s when I turned to salt, because I really like salt because I thought it sort of gave the finger to the Liddgeton designs, because the designs were so gentle and countrified, and I like the idea of bringing in a kind of aggressive quality to the shapes and the forms. And I did a lot of texturing, so this is just a big jar that I did. It's quite a big piece that I did in my big salt kiln.
Beautiful. There we've got a very different style piece.
And this is actually a contemporary piece. I'm quite mad about working with hollow tubes, and these are actually thrown tubes. I start with the top section. I throw it on a flat disc bat, and I make that hollow tube, and then I mount it over a hollow form and push it down, and it turns into a bowl then. a deeper bowl. Then I flip it over and then I throw a tube on the bottom again. So it's quite an involved process, but you end up with quite a nice. This is a particularly nice. It's very big. It's a big, big bowl. But I lose a lot of them. A lot of them crack no matter what I do. I think it's the differential temperatures on the outside of the pot and the inside. So I've lost quite a lot of them. But when they work, they're really nice.
It would make an interesting video to see how you throw this piece. I can't imagine, the hollow pieces and.
Yeah, it's quite a long process. So yeah, I could do that.
I can imagine that you need to have them at the same consistency or dryness when you attach them.
Yeah, well, obviously it is slightly drier when I throw a new piece on. I have to invert the top piece in order to throw the bottom tube on, so it has to be able to stand up and hold the support the piece going on the top.
How wide is that piece, Lindsay, or how big would that piece be?
I think it's somewhere in the 40s. Yeah.
So it's quite a huge piece. Well done. It's amazing.
Yes, it's quite nice.
Some good throwing skills there, hey? Here we've got probably one. Is that an older piece?
That's a very old piece again from. Yeah, I was again the actual bottom of the bowl, which you can hardly see as I do in a mold. And then on top of that, I threw two hollow tubes, so one on top of the other. And also those feet are quite elaborate. It's a lot of throwing. It's what you can see in the front is on the other side as well of that foot. So it's a middle piece, and then it's got a thrown piece on one side of the wheel, and then I call them wheels. Those wheels that.
So it's all thrown pieces that you assembled.
Yes, that's right. Also, and even these shafts that go up the side were actually thrown around on a wheel and then cut up and joined, and so they're very elaborate, long-winded pieces that takes ages to make them.
Very extraordinary. I love the that's also salt glazing, hey?
Yes, that's salt as well. Yeah. In those days I was using a lot of cobalt, and you can see what happens to the cobalt when you put a lot of rutile into it. Tends to go that golden green color. You get cobalt greens, but we blue cobalt. Yeah.
There we've got another teapot.
Yeah, that's also a very early one that I liked.
Is that from
I was interested in doing something special with the spout. So I wondered how I could get away from the usual spout, and I wanted a spout that would maybe tie in with that lid. I was interested in wings. I had all these pots with wings on them. So this, yeah, with the interior, the spout is sort of internal kind of thing that instead of the usual. But it works quite well. It pours quite well.
Do you repeat when you make a pot like this with all the different assemblies, or is it a one-off?
You mean, have I made? Yeah, I've made lots of versions of these. This is a particularly nice one. I made a lot of these in the 80s, yes.
Okay.
But when they don't work, they look quite crummy. But when they really work, then they're lovely.
There we're on to a new.
This is a much more recent piece, again with that handle that is a bit of steel wire. I like the curvature on the spout on that one. Beautiful. That's that cobalt with rutile tends to go that iridescent green.
It's a beautiful piece.
Thank you.
Most recent. It wasn't there when I visited you, so I haven't seen this. It's absolutely lovely.
Yeah, and I think I sold that long ago. I didn't make many of these. I just made one or two.
If we go on, Lindsay, can you hear me? Because it seems you're breaking up a bit. Can you tell us about brand new piece that you're making or working on?
This is a very, very interested. I'm getting into tile making as a money spinning line, which involves quite a lot of extruding, and I actually became interested in the idea of extrusions. This is actually an extruded piece made. Each one of those little circles is an extrusion, and I've joined the extrusions together to make a form. So again, it's a lot of hollow tubes joined together to make a kind of bowl, sculptural bowl. Salt is a problem on kiln shelves. If you've ever done any salting, you'll know how it eats up kiln shelves. And I'm always trying to think of ways of firing where you don't have to use too many kiln shelves. So I planned this to fire it on edge, not to fire it flat like it is now. So to fire things on edge and then be able to just put them flat after the firing, where they become bowls after the firing. I think, is there another one with this?
Yes, there's one. There you go, from the side.
That's how it looks from the side, yes. So you can see it has little feet on it.
And how big would this piece be?
Yeah, this is quite a small piece. I think it was maybe just on 40 long at the longest. But I wanted to make some much bigger ones, but I haven't had that much luck firing them actually. But the idea of working with the extrusions interested me a lot because of the kind of forms you can get.
And is that a terracotta clay body? It seems to be terracotta.
No, I think this was a darker salt, because I sometimes use a very dark salt body that goes almost black brown, you know. I think this is this one, because salt tends to turn everything very dark. So if you work with a salt body that's got a bit of iron in it, it tends to go dark brown.
It's beautiful. I'm going to stop share now, Lindsay, and then we can open up for questions and discussions. Anybody who have any questions for Lindsay?
Hi, Lindsay. I just want to ask the stainless steel cables that you use for handles, how do you actually join it into the piece?
If we go back to one of those pieces, you can see it's actually a little bit of extruded tube that has been stuck onto the sides of the teapot, and then that fits straight into.
I'll go back. Sorry, I'll go back
there.
to that picture there. Ah, sorry.
No, it's in between those two, I think.
That one there.
There, you can see that's a tube that's been a clay tube that's been stuck in there. And the steel wire goes into that tube.
And do you glue it in, or?
Yeah, I would just glue it in, yes.
Epoxy glue.
Yes, yes.
I love it. It's so original.
Yes, thanks.
Any other questions that you want to ask, Lindsay?
Yes, I also want to, sorry.
No, carry on.
Mention about the extruded work. I've seen it before the internet in magazines from overseas and so on, but it's a technique that hasn't really been explored in South Africa. And I think it's got so much potential, especially if you doing production work and not totally commercial, but have the handmade effect, but still be able to actually produce a few pieces for the market.
Yeah, that's right. And you can do, for instance, if you can't throw very well, I mean, you can just extrude long cylindrical type pieces and do something with them. What I quite like about them is they go out of shape as well. because I've got some hand extruders, and what I find is that the particles line up, so they always bend actually, which is quite interesting if you're willing to work with the bend. It's frustrating if you want to join pieces together because they do tend to bend out of shape. But now I've got a little mechanical extruder which eliminates that problem, because I'm trying to make commercial tiles and I don't want them to bend out of shape.
Yeah, there's that British potter, Walter Keeler, that use a lot of extrusions to make his signature stuff. He made like a vase thing, and they all extrusion stuff, and then he sort of bends them at an angle as they come out of the extruder, and then cuts them and so on. It's quite interesting on this extrusion theme.
Yes, that one teapot of mine in there, one of the old ones with a flat-fronted spout, that was very much influenced by our Keeler teapot. But yeah, he used the extruded handle. Mine is not actually. Well, it is extruded because mine is a circular one. His was a flat extruded handle on his teapot.
Lindsay, you say you're producing tiles now. Are you also salt firing them, or are they just high fired?
No, they're low fired. I'm just actually, I don't have tile setters, which are quite expensive. It's pretty commercial, that aspect of it. But I mean, I'm hoping to extend it to my own private work. But the actual tiles are just produced. I just biscuit fire them, and then I supply them to the guy who puts glazes on them and sells them to. I'm working with two architects who have a little business, a tile business, and they've got tile setters for their kilns, and so I supply them. They're not flat tiles. I put a kind of design in them. They're taking those and marketing them and selling them. So yeah, I'm hoping to make a really big extruder. It'll be quite expensive for me to get it a mechanical extruder, but a big one. So then I can really make some big pipes and see what I can do with it in my own work.
Awesome. I don't know if anybody who else have visited Lindsay. When I was there, you've got 3 kilns there that you built yourself. One is a huge trolley kiln. I think you used wood firing for that one, or I don't know if you changed that. Also.
No, all my kilns are oil fired.
Oil fired.
I've actually got a very old, smallish wood kiln here that was built by Christo Giles when he worked here with me. But all of my own kilns are actually oil fired. I'm an oil man.
I'm a bit scared. It makes me think of gas. I'm a bit hesitant on that. Maybe just because of the unknown.
Yeah, oil is a lot more powerful. You don't have that problem that you have with gas if the flame goes out. You don't usually have that. Although Ian Lenny had it once, but that's because he used to warm up his oil kiln with gas. And it went out, and then he relit it, and it blew the whole kiln right up, blew it away. But it's quite funny because the whole setting stays in place. The setting doesn't get blown up, just the actual shell of the kiln just blows up.
Yeah, you see, that's the scary part. I've seen those pictures on the internet where it has exploded.
Yeah.
The oil that you use, I'm just curious. You want to tell us more about that?
It's just old. I use paraffin and mix it with old sump oil. But I clean up the sump oil quite a bit. So I put it through quite a lot of sieving and clean it up.
So it's kind of an upcycling or a recycling process as well?
Not really. I mean, I just put it through sieves just to get the really heavy stuff out of it. I've found out I had to learn how to sieve it. You get these emulsions forming even after you've cleaned it up and put it in the tank. You get these emulsions. You get a lot of water build up in the line, and then you also get these emulsions that tend to clog the burners anyway. So, but I've found out that fortunately they're heavier than me, and I have a built-in homemade filter type system. But if you put it to a sieve type thing, it always just blocks up. But I've got these long cylinders with tap at the bottom. The oil comes across, and the heavier stuff sinks to the bottom of the cylinder. So all the water and then I just open the tap every now and then and lets out the water and the emulsions. So it works quite well.
You should be able to write a book on kiln building the way I listen to this.
Yeah, well, I know a lot about refractories. That's one thing you really have to know about refractories to build these very high temperature kilns. Because if you put the wrong kind of brick in the wrong place, then you end up, your whole kiln starts caving in.
I can imagine. There's a question from Cheryl. She wants to know the clay body. How does the clay body for salt firing differ from other clay bodies?
Well, as I say, salt tends to turn things very dark. So if you want to work a lot with colored slips and that, which what people like doing these days, you need a very white body. When I say white, I mean very low in iron. The interesting thing about salt is that if it's low in iron and very white, in other words, a body that if you fired it in an electric kiln or even in a reduction kiln, it would come out white. In salt, out white. As you push porcelain, as you know, porcelains have quite a high quartz content, silica quartz. If you have a normal porcelain, it will be, the color will be just white. So you'll get a clear, not particularly interesting glaze. If you start reducing the quartz content so that the silica content goes down and down, you can get a lot of interesting variations in color. Like you can almost get a pink. So instead of giving you white, as your alumina content in the clay body increases, you get a pink, and then you get an orange. So some of those earlier pots of mine that you saw, not earlier, but some of the salt pots that you saw, the little jugs and that, where it's almost a golden color. That if you fired that in electric oil, it would be a pure white clay, actually. The salt just picks up a slight alumina content and starts to go orange or gold. You know, the golden colors, the orange colors, the pink colors are all just dependent on the alumina content in the clay, and has nothing to do with putting colors on the outside of the pot or anything like that. So it's just what's in the clay, how the salt interacts with it.
You were saying that you fired to 1400, Lindsay?
Oh, that's the those earliest pots that are just reduction fired. Yes, the salt I fired to cone 11, but I don't know what, you know, the temperature is probably only about 13.
Yeah.
1330 or so, because the salt will make the cones melt earlier. So I've got a barometer. So it usually gets it doesn't usually go higher than 1330.
Just for your Sarah?
Sorry.
Sorry?
Hi, Lindsay. Hi. I just wondered why you fire high. Why you fire so high? What is it about those temperatures that you like?
Well, partly that's to do with because we started in the leach area where stoneware was the way to go, and if you work with gas, you wouldn't really want to work higher than 1300, because then you want really good insulating materials, because gas would be very expensive if you fire with dense brick. Oil is just so powerful that to get up to 1400 is easy with oil, and you can work with dense refractories. It's quite nice because it cools very slowly and it heats up. Well, you can make it heat up fast because oil with forced air behind it is just such a powerful fuel. It gives you the freedom to work, to fire fast or slow. But it was just an idea of building up immense strength in clay bodies and seeing what I could do. At one stage, I was planning to fire to 1600, but that would have been very ridiculous. I just like the idea, I think.
Challenge.
Lindsay, what would you give advice to your younger self?
Younger self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, what you do now. If you were to go back to say your early 40s, what would you say to yourself?
Fire a 1600. Would you do anything different to go back and restart?
I don't know. I made everything into such a production. You can see by those 2 pots, you know, there are much simpler ways to do things and have more production and sell. I've never been good at marketing, so I always admired people like Bosch who seem to be able to follow something and make it really saleable and stick with it for a certain amount of time and then drop it and move to something else and do it very well and sell it. But I've always seemed to be a divided person. I needed to find some way to earn a good living and then just to experiment, because I just love experimenting, but I hate having to say, now, how do I make this into a product that I can make quite easily and sell quite easily? I've never been able to. When I think about selling, I don't care that much about. It's like now I'm making these tiles. I don't even glaze them. I just pass them on to somebody else. You know, there isn't that much. There's knowledge. I've got a lot of knowledge about clay and glazes, but the aesthetics of it doesn't, at the moment, doesn't grab me, except to make interesting forms with extrusions. So there's self-involvement, but it's not whole in the way that trying to make a complicated hollow tube pot is it involves every aspect of me, I suppose. So I don't know. I'm sure I thought about that the other day. What would I have done if I was starting again? And I don't know. I can't remember what my answer was. Getting old, I can't remember what my answer was.
Lindsay,
So I'm sorry, I'm not answering that question nicely. I just can't think now. I know I had an interesting answer, and now I can't remember what it was.
Lindsay, who inspires you today?
Today?
Do you draw inspiration from others?
I don't know. I think I'm 74 already. I've got a few ideas left in life that I'd like to explore. I think there isn't time anymore to. You know, what tequila did in the early days, in those early teapots, his teapots. So that I would like to try and push and see what I can do with them. I don't really think in terms of people anymore that I would want to follow.
About your clay bodies, you are selling clay commercially, so you've got clay for normal electric kilns that people can order from you, or what is the process? How does that work?
Yeah, I started off. One of my commercial lines was making terracotta planters, and I trained a person to throw, and we used to throw. So we had a lot of terracotta clay. So I started selling that clay to people. So I've got that. As I still make that because I still do terracotta orders sometimes for people that I do myself, that I just throw planters and sell them. So I still have that clay. It's just it's based on I have a shale here on this property. It's not really what the potters would call a clay, because it's really not very plastic. But we have a lot of clays in the area, so I bring in clays that I dig, and then I mix the two together, my shale and the plastic clays. So that's what the terracotta is made out of. And then UT asked me to form, they were interested in a raku body, so I started a body which was based partly on this clay that I dig locally and partly on pyrophyllite, because pyrophyllite doesn't have that sudden expansion at 573. So I body that was about 50-50, which I now still, it goes happily up to stoneware and fires off-white, a sort of cinnamonish color. So there's that clay. Very, very plastic, lovely to throw, very, very fine. The terracotta is not that fine because it has the shale in it, although it's a very soft shale. Your turning tools will cut right through it. So you can throw it, and it also electrical goes right up to 1280 actually. And you can make ordinary dinnerware with it if you want. And then I have two whiter clays that are based on clays that I just buy in powders, and then with my kind of knowledge, I've just put them in to made them into two stoneware bodies. One, I call it CF2, which is an off-white clay, and then the other one is like ultra white clay. But it's not that easy to work with though, because it has the white bentonites that you get here. Because to try and make an ultra white clay, you need to use white bentonite, and the white bentonite that I've been able to get are not that plastic. But it is, you can learn to use it if you work with it a bit, but it's ultra white. The easiest one to work with that's just off white is the CF2.
Okay.
So there's four clays. I've got the terracotta, what I call the raku, which will also work at stoneware, which is very fine and does fires to a cinnamon color. And then there's the off-white CF2, which is very nice to work with. And I'd be interested to see what it's like in reduction. I haven't seen that. I've never fired it in reduction. And then the ultra white.
Okay, so would you mind if I then put your information on the ClayChat group if people would like to find out more about your clay, that they can contact you directly?
Yes, that would be very good. Thank you.
Great, because I've bought some of Lindsay's white clay that we've used in our recent wood firing, and the clay body fired beautifully in the reduction. I haven't done the clay. I must still do that for our next firing, then I would be able to give you feedback on that.
You don't have that off-white there. You don't have a little pot there to show us. I would like to see what it looks like in reduction if you have it.
I don't. It's at the exhibition, unfortunately.
Okay.
I should send you pictures. I'll send you pictures. Yes, but I'll do the test for the terracotta, and then you also gave me some black clay that looks pitch black. The clay, raw clay.
I think that's probably the raku, because the clay that I use that I dig is a really beautiful plastic clay, and you can see when you dig it, it's the top section is almost jet black, but has very little iron in it. The blackness is obviously due to organic matter. So when you make your clay body, it looks really dark. It looks almost black, but when you fire it, that organic matter fires out and it goes that cinnamony color in electric kiln.
Okay, yeah, we've got a Raku workshop coming up, so I'll be able to work with that as well. I'm very excited. Any other questions from anybody else for Lindsay at this stage? I just want to stop.